as promised to the problems in Reform UK. Last week, Nigel Farage replaced Ben Habib as the party's deputy leader with Richard Tice. And it's fair to say that Mr Habib hasn't taken that decision particularly well. And he joins me now in the studio. Ben, welcome to the show. Always a delight.
I love the way you guys set it up.
I haven't said that. Well, you wrote a piece in the Sunday Times yesterday where you said Nigel Farage fired me, and you talk about the democratic deficit in the party. You say reform needs reform. What do you mean by that?
OK, so the headline, Nigel Farage fired me, wasn't written by me. That was written by the Sunday Times, just to make that utterly clear. This is a debate. The democratization of Reform UK is a debate I've been having with Richard and now with Nigel since before I joined the party. And it was critical to me that I didn't join Reform without it acting in a consensual way. And actually, I asked for the democratization of the party before I signed up in March 2023. That was refused. And Richard very kindly wrote me a letter effectively affirming a few critical points, like we would stand against all the Tories across the country and that we would work in a consensual manner. And at the beginning of the general election, I said to Richard, you know, when this election is over, assuming we get the seats and the number of votes we think we're going to get or, you know, do well, we've got to move to democratization. You can't create a movement of people and then champion those people with promoting the democratic unit that is the United Kingdom, making the arguments for the sovereignty of the UK through our democratic parliament, and yet have a massive democratic deficit ourselves.
So specifically, what do you mean when you say you want to see the party have more democracy?
Yeah, so the party at the moment is structured as a limited liability company with 15 shares, 8 of which are owned by Nigel, and 5 owned by Richard. But of course, the 8 out of 15 is over 50%, and that gives Nigel basically complete control of the private limited party. And that worked very well as an insurgent party, getting it on the map. But now we have an obligation to the 4.1 million people who voted for us and those who would have voted for us if they weren't scared by the Tories, line that we would split the Conservative vote. You know, there are many people out there who would have also voted for us if it hadn't been for that threat. And so we have a movement to whom we are obliged. And we are all about the democracy in the United Kingdom. We're all about British sovereignty. And I think it therefore is required, particularly if Nigel is serious, and I hope he is, about Reform becoming the government in 2029. We've got to democratise before we get to 2020. Can you imagine fighting an election to become the government of the country when one man owns or controls the party? It's untenable. So there's a discussion that the party has to have now. It's not a knee-jerk reaction to my being fired. I made a speech on this 2 weeks ago in Wellingborough, where I was standing, and the article that you read in the Sunday Times was actually drafted before I was fired, for what it's worth. It was always coming on Sunday.
OK, so specifically, when you talk about the democracy, do you mean it should be a party with membership, where members have a vote and members have the power to remove the leader?
Yeah, so all political parties are structured so that members basically have a say in the creation of party policy. They may not be the deciding factor, but they have a mechanism by which they can voice that. There are elections that take place, particularly for the party leader. But beyond that, you also have committees and structures and so on that ensure that those in and around the party, the hierarchy, the shadow cabinet, for example, and so on, have a say, a genuine say in the way stuff moves forward. And that is critical.
What would you say to people, a lot of people who are saying you're giving Reform's critics precisely what they want? You're causing a civil war. You're causing revolt within the ranks. The party doesn't need that right now. It's only just got its feet under the table.
This is not a civil war. This is something that it's a debate about how we structure this party and making sure that we are true and act with principles and integrity to the movement that we've created. That movement doesn't belong to us. We're obliged to that movement, and we must now act like a proper party, and we must take those people as best we can under our wing, and we must treat them with kids' gloves. We have a debt of gratitude and an obligation to the British people and that movement, and that cannot be discharged as if it's a private ownership. And this has got no revolt. Listen, I love all the policies for which reforms, for which I stood on in the general election. This country will only prosper if reform forms a government. And I don't care whether I'm deputy leader or not. Couldn't give a damn. What I want to do is make sure that Reform UK, where I have absolutely, with Richard, created that movement, I give it every opportunity to be a principled party with integrity that can win that general election in 2029. I'll do any task that Nigel asks me to do, including cleaning the bogs, if that's what's required to get us elected. But I have to talk about the principles and the foundations of which I think the party will be successful.
At the moment, it feels like you're outside the tent. Do you want to be back inside the tent? Do you want to be a part of reform? Would you like to get back in?
What's critical to me is that political expediency and cronyism never take precedence over principle and integrity. We've got to change politics for good. The way the Labour Party and the Conservative Party have governed us for 27 years is unacceptable. So, yes, of course, I'd love to go on contributing to an entity where I've put my heart and soul, and I think have been, quite a big contributor and responsible for the creation of this wonderful movement. But it's got to be with principles, and so my principles come first, I'm afraid.
Are you hopeful that is possible, that you can shake hands again and move on and get stuck in?
Hands. I could give Nigel and Richard both a cuddle if they were here. It's not a matter of shaking hands. There's no personal grievance. This is about doing the right thing for the party and the country.
Do you think this is a healthy conversation to have? Because critics of the party, enemies of the party might start saying the same things, and I guess the party will need to know how to answer those questions.
Much better to have this discussion 5 years out from a general election than to be doing this 12 months out.
OK, Ben Habib, would you like to send a message to Nigel Farage? He makes his comeback in this studio tomorrow night. It's sure to see his interview. What would you like to say to Nigel?
I say, Nigel, yeah. Welcome back to GB News. Good to have you back.
I mean, like a little love letter to them.
I don't do love letters to other men.
OK, on that point, let's move on. Ben Habib, thank you very much for joining us. I think it's a very, very healthy conversation to have out in the open. Thanks for joining us here